All right, it is time to break down the 49ers 53-man roster. Yes, this one right here. Technically, you've got the entire 90-man roster on the screen. 53-man projections on the left side of the dividing line. We can go through this one position by position ahead of the NFL draft, which is less than a week away from starting. A week from now, we will be gearing up for rounds 2 and 3 on Friday evening of the NFL draft. So it's exciting times indeed. The 49ers have not been making much news here over the past couple days after signing Trent Taylor, their old wide receiver. He's back with the team now. Although yesterday the 49ers made a transaction. This one was expected. They have designated Isaac Alarcon, who is their offensive lineman, new offensive lineman, joined the team just a few months ago. They've designated him as their international exemption. So Alfredo Gutierrez, who held that international exemption for the past 4 seasons, he's no longer with the team. Isaac Alarcon now has that international exemption, so he takes Gutierrez's spot. You see him right here, shaded in that orange color for the international exception. Means that Alarcon does not count against the 90-man roster, and if he makes the practice squad, he will not count against the practice squad's 16-man total, exactly like Alfredo Gutierrez. Now, the cool part about this is that Alarcon and Gutierrez played for the same college team on the same college offensive line in Mexico, in the city of Monterrey, Mexico. Alarcon was the left tackle. Alfredo Gutierrez was the right tackle. Alarcon then played for the Dallas Cowboys. He was their international exception player, and now he's going to be with the 49ers. The move officially opened up a roster spot for the 49ers. So as we stand right now, the 49ers have 15 openings a week before the NFL draft on the 90-man roster. They have 10 draft selections. Those 10 draft selections obviously will count toward the 90-man roster. If they do make 10, they can take more picks if they trade for more, if they trade back for more, or if they trade a player for picks or a pick, or they can have fewer picks if they decide to consolidate picks and trade up. But just know that right now, as we speak, the 49ers have 15 spots free on the 90-man roster. They don't have to cut it down to 53 until after training camp and after the preseason, right before the regular season. Regular season begins in early September. But obviously, every move that you make, if you're the 49ers, has to be done with the 53-man roster in mind. And that includes all the salary cap moves. That's why my salary cap breakdown sheets look at the 53-man projection, and then we obviously talk about the current state, which is the top 51 rule. Eric Armstead is still on the books in terms of the salary cap. He will be for about another month and a half until June 2nd. But 49ers seem to be in decent cap shape. The 49ers seem to be in decent cap shape. I know that I lost you there for a little bit. How about we look at the entire 53-man setup? I accidentally X'd out of the screen. Embarrassing situation. So we're going to share the screen one more time. Get this roster up there. We will go position by position for the 49ers here, starting with the quarterback spot. So the way that I'm going to do this, I'm going to illustrate it through the lens of the roster. And we're going to zoom in a little bit so you could see in detail what the 49ers have to do. As you can see, they currently have 3 quarterbacks on the 90-man. Brock Purdy, MVP finalist. Josh Dobbs, one of the better backups in the league. I mean, he started 12, 13 games last season. Turquoise is the color that signifies a new addition from another team. And Brandon Allen. Gray signifies a re-signing for the 49ers. Brandon Allen was with them last year. Historically, Kyle Shanahan has carried 4 quarterbacks on his 90-man roster. He likes that for practice. He can run certain drills. He likes the situation with 4 quarterbacks for the meeting room in the offseason. He will not carry 4 quarterbacks on the 53-man roster, but I would expect another QB to be added here. It could be a rookie. It could still be somebody who's a veteran who hasn't been signed yet. I think that the 49ers will determine this after the draft. If they go through this draft and in the lower rounds, maybe even with their final pick at number 251 in the 7th round, if there's a quarterback that they really like that's still there, it could be a good value play to pick him. Obviously, 2 seasons ago, the 49ers spent their final pick, a 7th rounder, on a quarterback, and that worked out quite well. So that's a strategy that they might employ again if they really like a quarterback who can play the position at the end of the 7th round. It wouldn't threaten Brock Purdy's spot. It would give the 49ers some optionality at the backup quarterback positions and potentially some future expandability at the position. Because somebody that you pick in the 7th round, you're not married to him making the 53-man roster. Brock Purdy had to work his way onto the 53 over Nate Sudfeld in 2022. Somebody picked at the end of the 7th round could potentially be stashed onto your practice squad. And there's the whole school of thought of you should draft a quarterback every year. These guys are so damn valuable. You might as well throw more darts against the wall. In fact, the Brock Purdy pick really is good evidence in support of that strategy. They used pick number 262 on a QB. Not too many people thought much of it at the time, but now Brock Purdy is an MVP finalist and obviously the starter for the 49ers in line to make major, major money next season. Regardless, even if you don't look at this in terms of draft strategy and value as far as drafting quarterbacks, you need to look at this in terms of dynamics on the 49ers team and on the practice field. And in the past, they've loved having 4 quarterbacks on their 90-man roster, 3 on their 53-man roster. And that means there's still room for 1 more on this offseason 90-man roster. I think if they stumble into a quarterback that they like in the draft, that 4th quarterback is going to be a rookie. If they don't, they could bring in a veteran for that 4th spot. That brings us to the running back position. So we move down the list. Running back is right here. Right now, everybody that is on the 90-man roster, I have projected to make the 53-man. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey. Obviously, Elijah Mitchell. Behind him is Jordan Mason. Then there's the fullback, Kyle Juszczyk. And then here, just because I ran out of room for running backs in the spreadsheet, this is a running back. It's Patrick Taylor Jr. Big running back. I mean, height-wise, he's about 6'2", 6'3", first out of Memphis in college, but then Green Bay. Patrick Taylor Jr. has played for the Packers over the past couple of seasons. He's a really good pass protector. So I think he's got a solid shot to make the 49ers 53-man roster. And as things stand right now, Kyle Shanahan has routinely carried 4 running backs. McCaffrey, Mitchell, Mason, Taylor are 4. And 1 fullback on the 53-man. So I still think that the 49ers definitely want to have more bodies in here for the offseason. You don't only want to carry the guys that are going to make the 53-man on your offseason roster. You want to have some extra insulation because guys can get hurt. You obviously want to maintain trade potential. You want surpluses at every position if possible. So I see the 49ers potentially going for some lower round depth replenishment at the running back position in the draft. They have not worked out a single running back, and I've got my 49ers draft visit list here for you. We don't have at least a documented report of a single running back. These are the private workouts down here, 3 of them, and these are their top 30 visits. We've got 22 accounted for, so it is possible that they've visited a running back or had a running back visit them in the 8 unaccounted for visits, the 8 out of 30 that we don't have on this list. But the 22 that we have on this list, there is no running back there. That being said, I do think that the numbers dictate that the 49ers add a running back, either through the draft or through lower level free agency. Maybe they should even add somebody that can help at that fullback position. Maybe Patrick Taylor Jr. can do that. He's bigger than other running backs. He's been a good pass protector. He's a good blocker. Maybe he's somebody that can be Kyle Juszczyk's backup. But you look at somebody like maybe Blake Watson, low round running back pick that could join this team, be a practice squad projection, or somebody who could scrap and fight his way onto the 53-man roster. You can look at somebody like Frank Gore Jr. I mean, that he's probably going to be an undrafted free agent, Frank Gore's son. These are the types of names that I think the 49ers will be looking at to fill out the running back room. Because you're already full here, You don't have to take a big swing in the third round at a running back. Not like that's worked out for the 49ers anyway in the past. Although the biggest of swings they've ever taken at running back was for this guy, for Christian McCaffrey. They traded all those picks to Carolina, and that one did work out. So there are various schools of thought on how the 49ers can approach this. But just know that Elijah Mitchell's only under contract for this season, and then he becomes an unrestricted free agent. So the 49ers are going to want to make sure that talent continues to flow into the pipeline here, especially since you need to fill out this part of the spreadsheet. Then we move to the wide receiver position. The 49ers need to play both a short-term and a long-term game at wide receiver, and I'll explain what this means. I put the Debo, Brandon Ayuk balance. Obviously, you've got Debo Samuel. Obviously, you have Brandon Ayuk. Obviously, you have Juwan Jennings. Your top three receivers are all under contract for this 2024 season. But Brandon Ayuk's only under contract for 2024, and obviously negotiations with him are ongoing. Juwan Jennings is only going to be, once that tender is officially signed, it's a one-year tender unless they could reach a longer-term extension, so it's only going to be for this season. And then everybody's talking about Debo Samuel, even though he's under contract beyond this season. There's speculation that the 49ers might want to move on from him after 2024. I don't think that the 49ers have decided anything about post-2024 right now, nor should they. Fans and social media, they're going to make a bunch of roster decisions prematurely, roster decisions that won't actually pan out into 49ers roster moves. But a lot of the talk is, how long does Debo Samuel stay with the 49ers? What teams try to do, and I think what the 49ers have been really good at over the years, is building optionality into their plans. That's why somebody like Malachi Corley, the Western Kentucky wide receiver, who's a lot like Debo Samuel in terms of he catches short passes and he's very good with yards after the catch. That's why somebody like that is on the 49ers draft radar. That's somebody that you could bring in, and then you could theoretically say, okay, this is somebody who could replicate Debo Samuel's role moving forward. In the case of Brandon Ayuk, I think that he's a foundational piece for the 49ers, and they want to reach a long-term agreement with him. But you also have to have somebody that can play that X wide receiver position effectively beyond just Ayuk. So that's why they're looking at some other higher level receiving prospects. You want to give yourself options in the case of all contingencies. In the case of Juwan Jennings, I think that'd be a very hard player to replace just because of how physically he plays. But the 49ers want to give themselves options in case of all contingencies. Ronnie Bell is still on the team. Chris Conley is still on the team. He recently changed numbers to number 18, and they just re-signed Trent Taylor, who I actually have on the 53-man roster looking in right now. I have Danny Gray on the outside. Taylor is a whole lot more impressive as a punt returner than anybody else that the 49ers have on this team. And that is a big part of why they brought him back. Maybe it is the part of why they brought him back. They needed to raise the floor at punt returner. What they end up doing is going to depend on A, who they draft, B, training camp performances. Probably Danny Gray's last chance to prove himself. So he can say, I'm going to play myself. I'm going to practice my way onto the 53-man roster. That's something that he can potentially do this July. Trent Taylor, I mean, he's not a lock, especially if the 49ers draft somebody who can return punts. So he's going to have to prove that he belongs. Somebody like Chris Conley, big catches last year, but obviously you can't consider him a totally secure bet for the roster. Same thing with Ronnie Bell. Even though he's only entering his second year, this is a star-laden roster, and the 49ers don't have much time to sit around and wait for people. So beyond Ayuk, Samuel, and Jennings, I see there being a lot of competition, especially if the draft brings in somebody who can deliver in special teams, particularly on punt return in Trent Taylor's spot. But you want to, in the short term, be insulated in case Debo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk miss any time. And you want to, in the long term, be insulated in case you decide to move off of Debo Samuel next year. Or if somehow you don't get a deal done with Brandon Ayuk, you want to be insulated in that way as well. So this draft is really interesting because people are looking at the prospect list and they see names of receivers. And they're wondering how these receivers might fit with the 49ers. This is the wrong sheet. Sorry. Let's go over here. This is it. It's giving you guys a blank spreadsheet. But here's the prospect list. You've got Johnny Wilson out of Florida State. You got Jacob Cowing out of Arizona. That's a really electrifying player. People are really excited when he visited the 49ers. Then you have Bub Means out of Pitt. Those are the three receivers who are documented 49ers top 3 visits. Bub Means projected to go in the 6th round. Johnny Wilson in the 4th round. Jacob Cowing in the 4th round. You will notice the projected rounds of all of these players on the right column, and only one of them is a projected first rounder out of the guys that have visited the 49ers. Perhaps that is a clue that this team will not trade up, that they're going to want as many darts as possible in the middle to later rounds. That being said, only 22 of 30 possible visits are accounted for. So it is also plausible to think there's a chance, at least, that the 49ers have brought in some higher profile guys, but managed to keep it quiet from these reports. All right, tight end. Will the 49ers take a bigger swing to fortify George Kittle at that tight end position? Right now, they've got 3 under contract at tight end that I project to make the 53-man roster. They've carried 4 in the past. That means there's a spot for Cam Latu, who had big-time drop issues before going on IR last preseason. So we can easily envision Cam Latu here if he makes the necessary improvement for the 49ers. But I'm not putting him there just yet because spots are earned and not given on this 53-man roster. So Eric Saubert's a free agent, has been with a lot of teams, been in the league since 2017, was a 5th-round draft pick in 2017 at tight end, just like George Kittle. You see Eric Saubert, I think he's going to make the team as things stand right now. But if the 49ers draft another tight end, if they take a bigger swing to fortify George Kittle, if they bring in somebody like Tip Riemann from Illinois, I've talked a lot about him, a fast, big guy. If they do that, then all of a sudden, I think it's Saubert and Cam Latu competing for the final tight end spot, the 4th and final spot on this team. This is one of those positions where the 49ers are clearly still open to adding just by looking at the numbers. If you look at the roster numbers, they obviously want that pairing to George Kittle. I think Saubert gives them some stability. He's caught more passes over the course of his career than Charlie Werner, who just signed with the Atlanta Falcons. The 49ers did try to grab Brock Wright, the restricted free agent for the Detroit Lions, but the Lions matched the offer sheet. So that would have been an upgrade over Werner as far as pass catching goes, but the 49ers now must look elsewhere, which is why we are focused on the NFL draft. If you go to the visit list, they've looked at tight end Eric All from Iowa. That's a 5th-round projection. I think that the 49ers have learned that maybe going for a guy out of Iowa doesn't have that many catches just because Iowa is Iowa and they like to run the football. Maybe that's not a bad idea, considering that's where George Kittle came from. But other than Eric All, we have no documented 49ers tight end visits. By the way, All is projected to go in the 5th round, which would be something since George Kittle went in the 5th round out of Iowa all those years ago. 7 years ago. This is the moment that everybody's waiting for. We are about to look at the 49ers offensive line. Let's get this open on the screen. 49ers O-line. How convicted are the 49ers on their current group? That's the big question. I asked Kyle Shanahan right when the season ended if there's going to be big-time investment in the offensive line, or at least significant investment in the offensive line. And he kind of gave me an on-answer. But beyond that, he seemed to imply that investment in the offensive line isn't any more important than anywhere else, to which I think in the current situation, I would disagree. I think the 49ers do need to pour resources into the O-line, kind of like they did 2 off seasons ago when they re-signed Trent Williams, when they signed Alex Mack, when they drafted Aaron Banks. That was in the 2021 offseason. Well, now Aaron Banks right here is entering the final season of his rookie contract. Trent Williams is 36 years old, or he will be this season. Jake Brendel has 3 more years left on his deal, but he had a regression last year. He suffered through a regression after signing the contract. John Feliciano, back for 1 more season, but he's implied that he's going to retire after this season at right guard. And Colton McKivitz, he's been in the John Deere commercial with Brock Purdy, but Colton has struggled, especially in pass protection at right tackle. Jalen Moore, one of your backups, he's only under contract at the end of this season. They just re-signed Ben Barch to a 1-year deal. They poached him off Jacksonville's practice squad last year. There's Nick Zakelj, who was hurt 10 last season. They like where he's at mentally. Will he get to where he needs to be physically? We'll see. And then there's Spencer Burford. He's a lineman who has some promise, but has really struggled in the past couple of years, especially in terms of pass protection. And last year they replaced him with John Feliciano. They platooned a little bit in the Super Bowl, but before Feliciano got hurt, it was mainly Feliciano in that game. So just how convicted are the 49ers on their current offensive line? That is such a big question because the answer to it will tell us, are the 49ers going to draft 2 linemen, 3 linemen, only 1? Are they going to draft any offensive linemen this year? I don't see that as being possible because, again, some of these guys are on expiring contracts. One of them, the superstar, is 36. At some point, you have to begin the replenishment effort. The issue with offensive line is, perhaps more so than any other position, it has been documented that you need dudes, usually drafted fairly high, to be confidently project that they're going to succeed at the NFL level. You can't just sit there at 31 and say, okay, I'm going to pick the tackle that falls down to me and reasonably expect that he's going to become an NFL starter. It's typically the position of, okay, we need to make sure we get a guy higher in the first round. This is the one main reason why many fans think the 49ers might consolidate their picks and trade. But I also do see this draft as being strong with the offensive tackles and even some guards in the later rounds. Somebody like Zach Zinter, who broke his tibia and fibula, stud Michigan offensive lineman, was originally projected to go in the 2nd round. He might be available in the 4th because of that injury. Somebody like Caden Wallace out of Penn State, probably a 4th rounder that I think he's started for 4 years for Penn State. He could be somebody that's ready immediately to step in. Maybe not as a starter, but as competent depth for the 49ers. So maybe there is value to be found in some of these middle rounds with the offensive line. When we look at the 49ers visit list, they've looked at Blake Fisher, a Notre Dame tackle from the 3rd round. They've talked to Roger, and they've worked out Roger Rosengarten out of Washington. That was this past weekend. And he's such an intriguing prospect because he's the fastest lineman in this draft class. He's trained with Joe Staley. He played under Ed McCaffrey at Christian McCaffrey's high school, so he knows that Shanahan zone scheme, which McCaffrey implemented there. Options abound for the 49ers, and we'll see just how aggressively they decide to address this offensive line. I will be right back. I decided I'm thirsty, and I'm going to give you guys a look at the roster while I go get some water here. Lombardi right back message is loading, but we'll take a look at the 90-man in the minute or so that I'm gone. Then we're going to move on to the defense. If this ever posts. There we go. All right, we'll see everybody in a second. All right, we are back. Cheers with the water. We're going to move on to the defensive side of the ball. Going to the D-line, where investment never stops. Now, this is where we get into the turquoise zone. This is where the 49ers have added, and they've rehauled. I mean, keep in mind, the offense was the number one unit in football last season. The defense was far from it. The defense dropped from number 1 to number 12. When stuff like that happens, you fire the defensive coordinator and you make some changes. You try to become more financially efficient. That was behind the whole Eric Armstead release. First, they wanted him to take the pay cut. Then the release happened. So Armstead was replaced by Malik Collins, trade with the Houston Texans. But they also signed Jordan Elliott. They signed Leonard Floyd. They signed Yetur Gross-Matos. Every single one of these additions, all 4 D-line additions from the outside, is under contract for 2 years with the 49ers. Floyd, 2 years. Gross-Matos, 2 years. Elliott, 2 years. Malik Collins, 2 years. What that means is that you don't have any of these guys under a true long-term deal. It is Nick Bosa, Javon Hargrave, and then a bunch of relatively temporary contracts around those two. So I don't think that investment can stop. I don't think investment will stop on the defensive line. The 49ers, in fact, have looked at only one first-round graded prospect, according to what we know. Remember that we might not know about one of the 8 other visits. But that's Marshawn Kneeland, edge rusher out of Western Michigan. Solid 270-pound frame. Seems to really fit the prototype that the 49ers wanted that position. They used to like opposite Bosa. They used to like the lighter edge rushers. Go back to D Ford. That was a good example. But they wanted more of an edge-setting presence against the run. So somebody like Marshawn Kneeland, he packs the kind of body that you might see the 49ers want at that opposite spot. The most recent opposite edge rushers for Nick Bosa in this 49ers lineup that have played have been around those 270 pounds. So Kneeland is somebody that's visited, and that's noteworthy since there's nobody else on this 22-player list that has a first-round grade. When you look at where he'd fit, well, he would come in and immediately, if there were no injuries, he'd immediately challenge Robert Beal Jr. for a spot in the 8-man rotation up front. If Robert Beal Jr. makes a big leap this next year, then it'd be hard for anybody to come in and crack that 8-man rotation because there's only 4 defensive ends that are part of it. Another option for the 49ers is somebody like Johnny Newton in the first round, the big defensive tackle out of Illinois. They may have even a little bit more room in the short run at defensive tackle because Kevin Givens, whom they re-signed, if they draft a defensive tackle in the first round, he probably knocks Kevin Givens out of that rotation. They've got Hargrave. They've got Collins. They have Jordan Elliott, who did a nice job for the Cleveland Browns, was actually a starter on a good defensive line. And they also have Clea Davis. So there's competition here for that defensive tackle spot. But I don't think that you can ever stop investing in it if you're the 49ers. Especially because you have so many of these 2-year deals here. You have to think outside the box. You have to think ahead. There's a chance somebody like Malik Collins is only with this team for a year. And if that's the case, then you better keep on replenishing that pipeline now. They also have players they have so many defensive linemen on this team. 4, 8, 10, 14. They have 17 D linemen in the building right now. I think at most 11 will make the 53-man, probably only 10. So you have a lot of guys like Spencer Wagee, Alex Barrett, who've been on the practice squad before. Same thing with McGill and Austin Bryant. You've got some new bodies over here on the right side, guys trying to prove themselves. It is a crowded room, but there's still room for improvement within that crowded room, especially in that edge rushing spot opposite Nick Bosa. And we'll see what those defensive tackles do now that Eric Armstead is no longer with the team. At linebacker, I'm really, really curious. Where do D. Winters and Jalen Graham stand? These are the 2 draftees from last year. A lot of people will say, oh, they drafted 2 linebackers last year. Why do they still want more? Well, it's such an important position in the larger scheme of this defense. It's the intermediary between the line and the secondary for a team that has talked so much about the fact that it's rushing coverage were not suitably tied together last year. So linebacker is really important. They have added Devondre Campbell because Dre Greenlaw's probably going to start the season on PUP. We should get another update from John Lynch on Monday. They have added Ezekiel Turner. That's part of the focus on special teams of the 49ers. They re-signed Demetrius Flanagan-Foles. But when we check in on D. Winters and Jalen Graham, if these guys make the second-year strides the 49ers would obviously hope for them to make, they should be relatively set in the short run at linebacker. But you can always draft somebody, and this is why draft strategy is trending toward throw as many darts up against the wall as possible. You never know what's going to happen over the course of the offseason, over the course of the preseason, injuries, whatnot. You want option power. You never know when a trade offer might come in. The 49ers have traded linebackers for assets before. Dakota Watson was more of an edge rusher they traded, but Jonas Griffith, they traded. Denver Broncos, they got some capital back. So you want to be as prepared as possible. They've added Ezekiel Turner mainly for special teams. Like I said, Devondre Campbell is there to spell Dre Greenlaw while Dre Greenlaw is out. I think how highly the 49ers might draft a linebacker might depend on what they actually think of Winters and or Graham. But even if you don't want to draft a linebacker very high, even if you like Winters and Graham, that does not necessarily mean that you're out of the linebacker market altogether. You still might want someone later in the draft, and for that, I could present to you Tatum Bethune from Florida State, 7th round grade. 49ers looked at him the other day. Trevin Wallace out of Kentucky would be the higher end of linebackers, a 3rd round grade. So somebody like Trevin Wallace, that's who you look at if you're not as convicted on Winters and Graham. And somebody like Tatum Bethune is who you look at if you are a little bit more excited about the two names at the top. And that is D. Winters and Jalen Graham. Obviously, at the very top, you've got Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. All right, finally, to the secondary. The 49ers set for heavy draft investment. I'll tell you this much. The 49ers have their top 4 corners now. Charvarius Ward, Diamara Lenore, Isaac Yiadom, and Rock Ya-Sin. All 4 of these guys are only under contract for 2024. So same reason that you see elsewhere, you got to keep on replenishing these positions. The NFL, it's not for long, right? The pipeline that cannot stop. And it may be one of those years where the investment does pour into the secondary. Now, the 49ers have never used draft capital more valuable than a 3rd round pick on a corner. That was for Ambry Thomas in 2021. So keep that in mind. But also keep in mind the draft visit list here. Chau Smith-Wade, cornerback, Washington State, 6th round. Andrew Phillips, Kentucky, 2nd round. That's a little bit higher. Amir Reep, Ohio State, projected to be an undrafted free agent. So the 49ers have officially hosted, according to these reports, and also Decamarion Richardson out of Mississippi State in the 4th round. So they've officially hosted a handful of cornerbacks, but it's mainly mid-round grades for these guys. The highest grade is Andrew Phillips out of Kentucky with a 2nd round grade. So I don't expect them to break from tradition and go and draft a cornerback super high. I think they are more philosophically rooted in their defensive line. But I do fully expect the 49ers to address the position, because when we go to that 90-man roster, we can very clearly see where they're thin beyond 2022. Again, they would have to re-sign Ward. They'd have to re-sign Lenore. They have to re-sign Yiadom. They'd have to re-sign Rock Ya-Sin, even Chase Lucas. Well, I'm not sure about exactly yet. This was a undrafted free agent. Undrafted free agent, but also an unrestricted free agent. The 49ers picked up previously with Detroit. Even he is a bubble guy for this roster. It depends on who the 49ers pick. I just listed some prospects in the middle rounds. Whoever they do pick to move into the secondary is going to kick one of these guys off. Is it going to be Chase Lucas off the 53? Is it going to be Ambry Thomas? Probably not Darrell Luter Jr. They really like him. It'll be fascinating. Now, safety is, even more pressing because you don't have a fourth guy there yet. I don't think you count Taylor Hawkins or Eric Harris in on that 53-man roster. Plus, Talanoa Hufanga is coming off of the ACL. So what do? Justin Simmons still out there? Do you have enough money? I think that's what the 49ers are waiting for. See if his price comes down a little bit. Do you draft a safety? Because there are some on the visit list for the 49ers. Javon Bullard out of Georgia. Guy played the star position at Georgia. The star is the versatile DB, kind of a nickelback spot. Then he moved to safety. Really impressed a lot of people with his playbook knowledge and his versatility on the back end. But the star position, that started, I did a whole video on this the other day. Bill Belichick with the Browns in the early 90s implemented it with his defensive coordinator, Nick Saban. Saban took it with him to Alabama. Saban had a defensive coordinator named Kirby Smart. Took it with him, the star position, to Georgia. And now Georgia runs the star. That's where Javon Bullard is. And we'll see if somebody like Javon Bullard is a player the 49ers might draft into that safety spot. They can't pick up a bigger time veteran on an affordable deal because they have to work with that tight cap situation. Then there's Sione Vaki. Might remind some people of Talanoa Hufanga in that he runs only a 4.6, not the fastest 40, but he plays a lot faster than that. A lot of instincts for Sione Vaki, who also played running back at Utah. Vaki was a 30 visit list and also had a private workout with the 49ers. So Vaki seems like a strong chance for the 49ers to draft in this 2024 event. That's my look at the DBs. I got one more question, and that's at special teams for San Francisco. It's the returner question. Notice that on the roster here, I now have lines for returners. Trent Taylor is the top 49ers punt returning candidate. I'll highlight his name in teal there. Kick return is it going to be done differently now? You're going to have skill position players do it. New rules. It's safer. I think Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey are the 49ers' two returners. So the returner question is something that should be on everybody's mind. Kick returns are different. Punt return is a position where Trent Taylor has been dependable for the 49ers in the past. That's why they brought him back. But does the roster outlook change if you're able to draft a player with good return skills that can challenge Trent Taylor for that job? All right, that's it. I wanted to give you guys a good roster breakdown. So there you have it. Hopefully this leads you into the weekend. Happy hour on the West Coast starts in 12 minutes. So everybody enjoy.